So the Lubbock AJ today, they've got an editorial about Ferguson, Missouri, and the 1-year anniversary of the death of the gentle giant, Mike Brown. The headline of their editorial, Michael Brown's shooting death, a tragedy from both sides. They write, it's now been more than a year since Ferguson, Missouri police officer Darren Wilson fatally shot an unarmed 18-year-old Michael Brown to death. The anniversary of the shooting was commemorated on the streets of Ferguson by a protest in the form of a memorial walk. It was also, by the way, commemorated in looting later that night and with shots being fired at police. So just a reminder there. There was more than one way that they remembered the life of Michael Brown. Wilson, 29 years old, meanwhile, lives quietly and out of sight, a circumstance he maintains because the death threats that he has received since the shooting on the street of on the outskirts of St. Louis. He broke his long media silence recently with an article in the New York Magazine in which he opened up about his life from his childhood through the long months that followed the shooting. The AJ continues, it would have been nice to see him display an understanding that he killed someone. He talks about his life has been tough for him since the shooting. That same moment ended Michael Brown's life, began a tough life for Michael Brown's loved ones. When asked by the New Yorker writer Wilson about Brown, Wilson said, do I think about who he was as a person? Not really, because it doesn't matter at this point. Wilson twice has been vindicated of wrongdoing in the connection of Brown's death by a St. Louis County grand jury of state charges in November of 2014. He was also cleared by the Department of Justice. If the DOJ had evidence of wrongdoing against Wilson, rest assured he would have been prosecuted. And the article goes on, but they take a lot of swipes here at the officer, it seems. They write this part. The year since Michael Brown's death has been one of scrutiny of the actions of white police officers and black civilians across the country. As much as we support the first responders, we have been very concerned about some of the incidents, though they don't list what incidents they've been concerned about. I'll say this. If you're a family member of Mike Brown, yeah, you're probably upset. You're probably saddened. You lost a son. But is it a tragedy from both sides? Here's what I would say the real tragedies of Ferguson really are. One, a really good police officer, by all accounts, has had to leave his job. His life has forever changed. He was a victim of a mob action after the shooting. Police were not allowed to gather the facts. He was run out of town, and still today, there are people who want to kill this police officer. On the day where they commemorated Mike Brown's death, the gentle giant thug, they had a roasted pig out on display with a police officer's cap that said Officer Darren Wilson on its side. There are people who want to kill this police officer or former police officer. And now, for probably the rest of his life, he can't really do much in public. He said that in that interview that he's applied to different police forces, but they won't hire him. Not because he's not qualified, but because they don't want the PR. They don't want the bad PR that comes along with hiring this guy. Here's another tragedy from Ferguson. For the last year, there has been this false narrative that white cops are going around and shooting black people for sport. Because they're bored and they have nothing else to do, they're going to start shooting black people. The media, the country, the president has spent more time talking about the isolated incidents of officers shooting and killing unarmed black people. They've spent more time on that than they've talked about gang violence in Chicago, which have claimed more black lives. They have spent more time on this false narrative than they spent on abortion, which claims more black lives. than white police officers. And now every single time there's an incident where a black person is shot by a police officer, it's automatically injustice. And the officer is threatened by a lawsuit. The police department is threatened by a lawsuit. And police officers in this day and age, they can't do their job. Because now every single one of them have to think, okay, if I draw my weapon, or hell, even if I tase somebody, I could get sued. Somebody could say that's discrimination. The Sandra Bland deal here in Texas. She killed herself. She hung herself in jail. But there are people who have wanted that police officer to be fired, to be prosecuted for playing a role in her death. He didn't do anything. He pulled her over. Did he help escalate the situation? Possibly. That counts as a suspension. He didn't shoot her. He didn't beat her over the head with a baton or with a gun. But automatically, we have to say he's guilty. This officer in Arlington, Texas, shot and killed a 19-year-old. We don't have all the facts. The police department has not had time to do an internal review of what happened, and they fired him. Why? Because they're afraid of the press. They're afraid of the angry mob that I promise you will never be happy. So those are the real tragedies out of what happened in Ferguson. That we continue to go with this false narrative that cops are evil. And that they're going around and they're just shooting people for fun. And we know that's not true. Those of us who actually have brains, it's not true. But that's what's being sold. And it's still being sold that Mike Brown did the hands up, don't shoot. You still have that chant going on. Those are the real tragedies. A thug getting shot, while sad for his parents, if you attack a police officer and attempt to steal that officer's gun, I don't feel bad for what happened to you. You brought it on yourself. You attack a police officer, you bash in his face, and you expect the nation to feel bad for what happened? No, I don't feel bad for what happened to Mike Brown. He was a thug who attacked a cop. He got what he deserved. That might be harsh for some of you to accept. But you go and try to assault a police officer. You try to beat up a police officer, and you try to steal an officer's gun. See what happens. I don't think you'll win. Just a little bit of time left here on the show. Received an email during the break about the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, their editorial that they had today. Tragedy on both sides. How PC do you have to be? And not only, you do this a year later for the Avalanche Journal. You didn't write this piece last year. And the Avalanche Journal seems all hurt because Darren Wilson didn't express sympathy for Mike Brown. Why would you? Let me ask you this. If you were assaulted by a thug, got your face beat in, the thug attempted to steal your gun for one reason and one reason only, and that was to shoot and kill you. You shot and killed him in return. And then you lost your job, your livelihood, basically your entire public servant life because of that thug. Would you have that much remorse after killing him? In an interview a year later in the New Yorker said, do you ever think about Mike Brown, the person? Or if they interviewed you and said, would you ever think about this thug that Well, they didn't put it that way. This person that you shot and killed, yeah, you had to relocate your entire family. Other police departments won't hire you because you're a PR disaster. Well, who would feel remorse? In that interview, I'd sit there and go, no, I was defending my life. I'm sorry he was a moron. I'm sorry he wasn't raised right. Ooh. Now, see, that would have been really politically incorrect. But the AJ, this was a tragedy on all sides, or on both sides. Now, real tragedy, as I brought up earlier, is that this cop basically lost his life because the media ran with this hands up, don't shoot, Black Lives Matter, white cops are just killing off black people for fun attitude. And it's still going on a year later.